although it may be Kelly and Christy, you just need it, are getting of the age where they need it up close. All right, prayer requests. Unspoken? Okay. Unspoken? All right, guess everybody's good then. Probably need to pray for Roger and Brenda. We're going to their granddaughter's last volleyball game tonight, so they're probably somewhere between here and not Tulsa, but it's near Tulsa. So keep them in prayer as well. All right, Dave, would you lead us?
Sacred for the Borins tonight. Ask you, Father, to be with us as we enjoy your word and just bask in the glory that is yours. Thank you for sharing some of that with us tonight, Father. Be with Tony, bless him. May we be drawn closer to you through your word. Pray in Jesus' name.
Amen. All right, Ruth 3. Another, it's a really good chapter. I see a lot in this chapter as it connects 2 to along with 4. And last week we left with hope in chapter 2, verses 22-23. Said Naomi says to her daughter-in-law, "It's good, my daughter, that you go out with his maids so that others do not fall upon you in another field." So she stayed close by the maids in order to glean until the end of barley and wheat harvest, and she lived with her mother-in-law. You remember that Boaz provided for her. They're in a place of dire straits, needing basic provisions and care, and in doing so, they go whenever the harvest begins and find that provision with Boaz. And not only do they find that, but they find that Boaz then comes and cares for them and says, "I'm going to take you through all of the harvest." So all of the barley, all of the wheat harvest, you've got plenty to take care of. We've said this with Sabbath. Why is it that 7-year Sabbath would be hard to do in relation to your fields? In 6 years, Israelites were supposed to glean their fields. God said that on the 6th year, I'll give you enough for 2 years, and then on the 7th, let your fields leave your fields alone, and then you can pick that back up then on the 8th year. If God provides enough in year 6 to cover year 7, why is it that Israel would struggle with keeping the Sabbath on the 7th year? God's already provided enough for them to cover them in the 7th year. Why would they still harvest in the 7th year if God has already given them enough? Why would that be a struggle? Yeah, what happens in year 8? Yeah, what happens in year 8? All of us here, I guess, are either looking towards or in retirement. The question always is, how much is enough? How much is enough? And the answer to that is you never get a feeling that you have enough because no one knows what is coming the next year. No one knows what's coming the next year, the next day, the next whatever. But God provides enough prior to for us to be able to trust Him. So in giving, God blesses us, if you will, beyond measure, but that blessing is never meant to become what we place our hope and trust in. It's the one who provides that blessing. So there's always a process in the Christian life where progressive growth within the Christian life is growing a disposition to be able to handle more, where one doesn't trust in those things, he trusts in the God who gives or blesses those things. So God blesses Ruth with enough harvest that they're going to be cared for in all of the harvest time, and in being provided for in all of the harvest time, they now have a window of provision where they don't have to, one might say now they don't have to worry. It's not, the house isn't on fire, right? The house isn't on fire. But the concern is, well, then what? Then what? And so there's always going to be this rubber band tension that God uses in providing plenty and then giving a stretching point of what if, is that enough to keep us centered in relation to Him? And we're going to see that. We've already seen that, but that's part of the Christian life. It's important to know that. There are certain people who live as if Christmas is something that happens new every year. It catches them off guard, right? They got to go to the bank and get a loan because they didn't know Christmas was going to happen this year. It's like the guys that always made fun of, in construction, but construction workers are the worst. They act as if winter never comes. Where, summertime, you're just blowing and going. Well, that's great, but what's going to come winter? Winter's going to come and it's going to slow down. If for no other reason, just because of weather. But there are some who act as if they've never seen a winter before, right? In relation to that. Well, guess what? In the Christian life, we should take a big picture view in understanding that the struggles and the trials of life are going to come. It's not a matter of if, it's just how is it that God does in relation to these types of things? And does He give us enough understanding and wisdom to live well in the midst of those circumstances? A lot of us in the midst of now, in the midst of our culture right now, have concerns about nation and all those things. And that's understandable. But the things that we are going through in terms of America, are they new in the history of time? They are not new. They're just new to us. But has God given us plenty of information through His Word to have understanding and wisdom in how to live in a time such as this? Oh, absolutely, 100%. Absolutely, 100%. Proverbs, what was it? Proverbs. Go to Proverbs 20. I really wasn't necessarily thinking about this, but it certainly applies. But Proverbs 20. Was it 20? Yeah. 20 verse 3. Ceasing from strife, keeping away from strife is an honor for a man. It is an honorable thing not to be constantly in the middle of strife. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're even the cause of it. Can be, but doesn't necessarily mean that you're the cause of it. Any fool will quarrel. I remember a professor said once, long time ago, even before almost before my time. He said, with the computers used to be, you put these little numbers and symbols and slashes in just to get your computer to open. And then if you got one that could add 2 plus 2, you had a computer, man. I mean, you were moving, you were moving up in the world. You had the big bubble, almost like the bubble TVs, monitors on there or whatever. And he said, with computers, what's going to come is excessive information. It's going to be too much. You're going to have to learn how to deal with how you're going to manage information because there's going to be too much. Well, guess what? It's not new to the Bible. There's all of these things that now you see going on in the world in terms of conflict and quarrel and everything else, and they've always existed. It's just that you know more now than what you did before. Well, guess what? Does the Bible not prepare you for those things? The Bible's prepared you for those things. Don't become too engaged in the quarreling of men. Don't be too engaged in that. Why? Because you'll find that it'll drag you into the quarrel. Well, in the Christian life, has God given us enough understanding, wisdom, and knowledge to know how the Christian life lives in plenty and in famine, in times in which we've been provided for? But it looks like now that harvest time is over, harvest time's over now. What's going to happen next? Winter, which means the question mark comes up. Okay, so God's given us enough to make it through harvest time, but now what's going to happen now in winter? You wouldn't think this, but what's man's general responses to his problems? Winter's coming, and it doesn't look like I'm going to have anything to eat, or I'm not going to be cared for or provided for. What's man's general response to that, Christian or not? Start hoarding. Okay. What else?
In my case, you can your garden so that you have that extra food through the winter.
Okay. So there can be a preparation for it. But what happens whenever you look forward and you see forward as a crisis that's coming? What does man generally do? Fear. And from a state of fear, what does he do? Most of the time in the state of fear, what happens is we don't naturally trust God. We most naturally seek to figure it out ourselves. Now, this doesn't take away from being diligent, like kind of what Brenda's talking about. Doesn't mean that we're not diligent. But do we carry the load of figuring it out? It's a question that you've got to really ask yourself. Because here's what we found out. In this story with Ruth and Naomi, you have the providence, the diligence of man, but then the providence of God carrying you through into protection. But following that, you still are in the middle, and up comes next another crisis. And that crisis, guess what comes with that crisis? Testing. Now, are you going to trust God, or are you going to figure it out on your own? Doesn't mean you're not diligent, but in your diligence, are you seeking to carry the load, or are you trusting God to provide for you through the crisis? Well, guess what happens? It just so happens in the middle of a crisis situation that she came upon a field. It just so happened. And oh, by the way, that it just so happened that the field that she got in on was Boaz, who just so happened to be her kinsman, who just so happened to be a righteous man, right? Who then shows himself to be faithful and provide for her through the harvest, and says, I'm going to provide and care for you all the way through the harvest. But what's coming next? Winter. Well, guess what you have to do again? You have to decide in the middle of diligence, are we going to trust God, or are we just going to figure it out ourselves? And after that, guess what's going to happen? Going to come through, but then what's going to happen? Another crisis on the horizon. And what are you going to have to do again? You're going to have to decide whether you trust God or whether... Here's what I'm saying. Paul says, work out your salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who is at work to both will and do for His good pleasure. Which means what? You are continually going back to this faith-trust relationship with God. Continually. We have sold it, unfortunately, as a one-time deal. One and done. It's a continual process. Now, if you're in the middle of that process, this is a great chapter. You know, last year we talked about marriage and some of those things. This is a great chapter when you're in the middle of, if you will, crisis. How do you live through it? And what does this have to do with covenantal relationship? How does God work in the midst of all of that in relation to these things? Okay? It's a great chapter for that kind of a thing. If I was going to look for a chapter where I say, okay, you know, Tony, it looks like I'm going left, right. It looks like I'm going through storms and I've just come out of something, but I'm still having a hard time trusting God and being faithful and in relation to all those things. And, you know, there's this life cycle in the Christian life that it seems like it's just this roller coaster ride. How is it that I can ride the roller coaster and realize that God's going to carry me through and I'm going to actually get to the end? Right? Used to, I like to ride roller coasters before I became a diabetic. After I became a diabetic, for some reason, motion sickness became an issue. And then I watched those kids ride it, and I'm like, y'all are stupid, crazy. They've got stuff now that's flipping them this away while they're doing this. And, you know, they had the Texas tornado in Six Flags, and I rode it once and threw up on the little airplane ride afterwards. People were like, that kid right there can't handle squat. Rode the Texas tornado. You know what the Texas tornado is? You lean up against the wall, and it spins you so fast that it sucks you to the wall, and they drop the floor out from underneath you. And you're sucked to the wall because it's spinning so fast, right? No one in their right mind would get in on that ride. I'm pretty sure my dad pushed me in line and said, oh, no, this one will be great. You'll love this one, right? Got off of it and went to the little airplanes that, you know, poo-poo in the air, you know. And I still hadn't gotten over the Texas tornado. I got off of that ride and showed everybody my lunch. This boy can't even handle the little airplanes that go in a circle. How can we handle these life things that are going on? Chapter 3:1. Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, my daughter, shall I not seek security for you? Okay. Shall I not seek security for you? Now, does Naomi probably have good motive here? I would say probably so. One of the things we saw in last chapter is God took Naomi from bitter to, I wouldn't say great, but at least better. He's starting to heal Naomi's soul a little bit. Naomi's been through so much hardship in life and the loss of family, the closest ones that she loved. She's in a deep, depressed state, and God's moving her in terms to a better place. And now Naomi comes in here, shouldn't I seek security for you? Before, when she came in, what did she say? Call me bitter, I'm here by myself. And Ruth's sitting right over here next to her. Right? So she says, shall I not seek security for you, that it may be well with you? Now, is not Boaz our, and your translation either says probably kinsman, or it may say redeemer, right? In other words, with whose maids you were, behold, he winnows barley at the threshing floor tonight. Now, so what they would do is they'd have one threshing floor. It'd be up at the top of the hill. And they would take those bundles. Remember we talked about last week, they gathered them in bundles. They would take those bundles, they would put them there in the threshing floor on top of the hill, and then each field owner would take turns using that. Ox, animals would walk over top of them, and then they would take the leftover, everything that was beat up, throw it in the air. The wind would carry the chaff off. And then what would fall would be the grain because it's heavier than the chaff. So it'd always be on top of the hill, very visible place. That's why you remember when we were talking about Gideon? Gideon was threshing wheat or threshing the harvest where? Do you remember? Wine press. Where's the wine press? Yeah, down below. Why? Because they were being oppressed by the Philistines. They didn't want to be seen because the Amorites, Philistines were all coming in, raiding the land, and they would come during harvest time, take all that they had, kept them poor, right? So Boaz it's his turn, if you will, up on the hill, threshing his harvest. And she says, hey, his turn to be up there. They're going to be up there threshing the harvest. It says, verse 3, wash yourself, therefore, anoint yourself, and put on your best clothes, and go down to the threshing floor, but do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. Harvest time is always meant to be a happy banquet time. We lived, I didn't, but Dad and everybody lived up north. It seemed like everybody's in a better mood once harvest is about done. Because all of a sudden, all of your labor that you put in, you're not worried so much about hailstorms, and you're not worried so much about, is it going to rain? And it's a very joyful time. But it's interesting because is Naomi and Ruth in a joyful, per se, happy time? What are they worried about? See, they're worried about their security of the future. But Boaz, he has, if you will, in his stage is in a secured future state. Okay? This is why one of the things that we say, especially here, is you're blessed to be a blessing. That's because God doesn't bless everybody at the same time everywhere. Meaning, you may find yourself in a blessed state in which God is not just filling your cup, but it's overflowing, and it's meant to overflow in another cup whose cup may be empty. So the covenant of God with His people would be that the people who are being blessed, the overflow of that blessing is going to fall upon those who are in need, because we are blessed in order that we might be an overflow and a blessing to others. Okay? Even if you think about your personal, I don't even like to call it that, but your personal spiritual life. If the totality of your focus is on yourself, what am I going to get out of my Bible reading today that's going to help me and make me and da-da-da-da-da-da-da? You are hemming yourself in almost for failure. In the same token, we don't just read our Bibles and have personal prayer time so that I can see how that this is going to benefit someone else. It really has nothing to do with me. That's not the way we think through that. How do we think? We are thinking about God who is filling our cup that the cup may overflow and be a benefit to someone else as well. Is Boaz in a beneficial, blessed place? Absolutely. But don't think that Ruth and Naomi are. They have been blessed, but what are they worried about according to Naomi? Her future. Her future. So Naomi says to Ruth, it's Boaz's turn, go up to where he's at. But she says, don't go while he's feasting. So in other words, don't go up to the hall where everybody's at, where he's feasting. What's going on here? Why that? Okay? Why that? I'm not asking for an answer. I'm just saying that should be going in our mind. Why is she saying to Ruth, go to him, but don't go to him while everybody else is around and they're feasting? Wait. Okay? Wait. Until he's finished eating and drinking. Verse 4. And it shall be when he lies down that you shall notice the place where he lies, and you shall go uncover his feet and lie down, and then he will tell you what you shall do. What's going on there? And it depends on who you ask, okay? It depends on who you ask. What is not going on is some sort of sexual immorality, okay? Number one. That's not going on. There is some question as to whether or not this is some sort of cultural thing, which is a possibility, but we don't necessarily know. There is also some indication later on that we may find out that there's something else that's just naturally going on that happens when you do this. Do this and that will happen, kind of a thing. Anyway, she says, uncover his feet, and then he's going to tell you what to do. Okay? Meaning, whatever he tells you to do, do that. Now, this raises a big question mark. Okay, so you go to a guy who is absolutely just finished having a banquet, merrily happy, find where he lies, go lay down by his feet, and whenever he wakes up, you just do whatever he tells you to. Now, if Ruth, a Moabitess, I would be saying, do what? Because probably what a Moabite man does next ain't going to be good. Okay? But Ruth says, all that you say, I will do. You being Naomi. Okay? So she went down to the threshing floor, did according to all that her mother-in-law had commanded her. How is Ruth living right now? Act as if you don't know the story. Right now, how is Ruth living? What is driving her in relation to what she does? Who is influencing her, and how is she responding to that influence? Naomi, who is mother-in-law, a mother-in-law, but whose rest of the family is Israelite, and husband and sons are dead. What's Ruth doing with her mother-in-law? Okay. Obedient would be one way of saying it. Deb?
Well, she's acting as a daughter, more of a daughter than a daughter-in-law.
Right.
And Naomi is acting more as a concerned mother.
Yeah. So she's acting in what type of a relationship? What did you say?
Another Jennifer.
Oh, yeah. This Jennifer, not that Jennifer. Yeah. Jennifer has influence even when she doesn't. She answers through, now she's answering through second and third generational people. Even when someone, the proverb says, even when someone is silent, they are perceived as being wise, and Jennifer has figured that out.
I don't know if this is relevant, but I read somewhere that the reason that she told her not to be seen is because ladies or girls of ill repute sometimes have come up.
So we're gonna have to figure that out, yeah, as things go along, as far as the storyline goes. But but as we're following this story, what's driving Ruth? Yeah, and in obedience with Naomi and even her vulnerability, she is extending honor to Naomi and her family. See, think about this. This is a storyline. I'm not saying it's not true. It's an account, but don't think about it just as a documentary. It's written in a narrative form. Who is lead character opening the stage and sending? Naomi. Who is sort of over here? Another main character, but he's kind of over on the side. He is the one who is blessed. Boaz. Here is Ruth. What's motivating and driving Ruth? Her mother. Okay, her mother. It's continually coming up. All that you say, I will do. Naomi comes to her and says all of these things. Ruth's response, all that you say that I would do. She is a Moabite with a Moabite history and culture, probably doesn't fully grasp everything that's going on here. And so there's a sense in which she's showing honor, obedience, loyalty, love towards Naomi, and really trusting Naomi, because Naomi says, hey, I should be looking out for your security. Here's what you need to go and do. Now, Ruth's already been in the field the entire time, who has been under Boaz's protection because she's in a dangerous place, and she's been there the entire harvest, being very diligent in relation to that, but now they're looking forward in relation to what's fixing to come, famine, if you will, or non-harvest time. And Naomi says, okay, here's the next thing.
If you look at the two girls, Orpah wouldn't have worked in this story, because Orpah wasn't willing to basically follow Naomi to begin with.
Well, there's a splitting of roads there, where that's why the narrative was explicit, that she wasn't just, I love Naomi, I'm going to take care of Naomi. She abandoned her other gods and says, your God will be my God. And Boaz reaffirmed that last week.
She almost seems to be the type of person that would, we don't know, they would say was very submissive to her husband, because now she seems to be very submissive to Naomi.
Well, we're fixing to find that. We're fixing to find out about that. It's a major undercurrent here that we haven't fully, there's hints of it, but we haven't fully uncovered it yet. Yeah. So she, verse 6, goes down to the threshing floor, did it according to all that her mother-in-law had commanded her. When Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry, okay, he's a happy guy right now, went down to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. Why is he lying by the heap of grain? Because everybody else also knows that this is threshing floor time. Why was Gideon in the cave basement? Because he couldn't protect his grain. Israel couldn't protect his grain. Why is Boaz sleeping next to the heap? He's going to protect the grain. He's going to protect his harvest. She came secretly, uncovered his feet, and laid down. It happened in the middle of the night. The man was startled and bent forward, and behold, a woman was lying at his feet. What startled him? Don't fully know. But I lived with, when we were growing up, shared a bedroom with my brother. And I can tell you at least one person in this world whose temperature gauge was his feet, and that's my brother. Okay? If it's hot, the feet would be outside of the bed, and if he was cold, they would be under the covers. Right? Could very well be that that's part of what's going on. Right? Where he's waking up, per se, cold, bends over, regardless, he wakes up, startled, cold, looks up, there's a woman laying down here by my feet. What's going on? What's happening here? She wasn't there when I laid down, at least I don't think, right? Because he says in verse 9, who are you? So he doesn't, it could be because it's dark, but you know, any of you woken up in the middle of the night, are you fully, one of the reasons why Jen and I have stayed married for so long is because in the morning, both of us are the same type of first thing in the morning people. We leave each other alone, right? We don't go into great, serious financial topics when we first wake up, right? We're just trying to figure out whose house are we in. Is this our house? I think so. Okay, then let's find the bathroom once again if we can, right? So, who are you? She says, I am Ruth, your maid. Now, underline verse 9, so spread your covering over your maid. Now, in the margin there, write 2:12. You remember what Boaz said to her? 2:12, he says, may the Lord reward you and your wages be full from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to seek refuge. Same type of verbiage here. Guess what Ruth is saying? I'm here under your wings to seek refuge. I'm here under your wings to seek refuge. Because notice what she says next. For you are and you may underline that and put right next to it, you are Redeemer. You are Redeemer. Remember whenever in Israel's history, family line, family lineage, caring for family is a priority. And so if one would die in the family, childless, it was the next relative's responsibility to take that person and care for that person so that the husband, that the brother, would be cared for and his name wouldn't die. Okay? She's coming in under Boaz and is saying, you prayed for me that the Lord would bless me, the one who is come under the Lord's wing seeking refuge. I'm coming under your wing seeking refuge. Why? You're a redeemer. You're a close relative. Now, what's Boaz going to do? What's Boaz going to do? See, all through this, there's hints that says, is Boaz really what he says that he is? Is Ruth really who she says? Is there this integrity? Is there this wholeness about them that's really legit? And one might understand, in the best of times, it's easy to say yes. Up until this point for Boaz, he's basically lived in the best of times. But now he's come to the New Testament and has said, don't just go and look for, when someone comes to you in need, don't just go and say to them, go and be full, I'll pray for you, when you can meet their need. What good is that? Ruth is coming underneath Boaz and saying, you have the means to be the very answer to the prayer that you were praying for me. What say you now? What say you now? Verse 10. Then he said, may you be blessed of the Lord, my daughter. You have shown your last, now circle last, underline kindness, and above that, write Hesed, H-E-S-E-D. Y'all know the word Hesed, don't you? Because we support the Hesed Kids Club. Hesed is loyal love. Loyal love. You have shown your last loyal love. In other words, that which you have just done, you have shown to be better than the first. What does he mean there? Circle first. You've circled last, then circle first. And then he gives us the answer to it. By not going after young men, whether, So it's interesting here because he brings out something in the story we didn't think was the case. Could Ruth have cared for herself? And the answer is actually she could have taken care of herself, her security, in her own way if she had wanted to. Because she could have had any young man that she wanted to have, rich or poor. So why didn't she? Why is he saying, this is a major just pivot point in this story. 10 is a pivot point for the story. Because he's coming in here and he's saying, what you have just done in this act of hesed, loyal love, who is she being loyal to? She is being loyal to Naomi. How? Think about the argument here. He's saying, this act of kindness is greater than the first. Now, her first act of loyal love was what? We talked about just here in a minute ago. Orpah and her did what? They split. And she showed loyal love to Naomi. It's her first act of kindness. But he's saying this act of kindness that you are doing now is even greater than that. How is that the case? And he says, you could have had any man that you wanted. You could have any young man that you wanted, rich or poor. Instead, you came to me. But when she came to him, what did she say? You are what? Why does Redeemer matter? Yeah, but even bigger than that. What did we say?
Well, isn't Boaz a provider for all of them with his harvest? But he's already provided for harvest. And this is good, we're thinking through it. He's already provided for harvest. And he's not saying here, he's saying here that what you've just done is a bigger act than just the loyalty that you showed Naomi. And he's saying the reason this act is bigger is because you've chosen me. You haven't chosen any young men, and you haven't chosen rich or poor, any of which that you could have had. Why is that a greater act of loyal love?
It has to be back to the family.
It's because she is honoring the family, and she is honoring the death of her husband, and in honoring not just the death of her husband, she's also honoring the name of Elimelech. She is extending honor to the family. She didn't have to, but she did. She did. Now, New Testament, what do we know about honor in relation to honor thy father and mother? Because somebody's already said it. She's acting more like Naomi is her mother than she is mother-in-law. It's because she is honoring this connection that she had with husband, death of husband, and now father who is passed. We already, interestingly,
unbeknownst to this part of the story, we already said this last week. Because Boaz said what about Ruth? You are providing for the dead. Elimelech can't care for her anymore, and what have you done? You've stepped in and you've provided in relation to honor with providing for her and her provisions. But now what's she also doing? She's doing it with the very essence of matrimony. Family line. What is it that Naomi lost? She lost her 2 boys. She lost her 2 boys. Ephesians 6, 1 through 3 says, honor thy father and mother, for it is the first commandment that is given with a promise of what? Yeah, but it's interesting because, let's go there real quick. Ephesians 6. Children, 6:1. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may be well with you, and that you may live long on the earth. One might say here that the promise isn't necessarily you're going to live long. You're going to live well as long as you live. This is not a promise of all of life after this is going to go great. But you're going to have a fullness of life. There's going to be a fullness of life. Doesn't mean it's not going to be hard. Why do I say that? Go down to verse 12. Our struggle is not against flesh and blood. 10. Be strong in the Lord and the strength of His might. Put on the full armor of God so that you will be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil. Our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against rulers, powers, wicked forces of darkness, against spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. It's not a promise of necessarily an easy life, but there is a wholeness, a fullness of the life lived that you're going to have here on earth that you wouldn't have otherwise. This same thing happens in almost the same thing. He almost uses the same language in Romans 8. We can go there real quick. We've got time. In Romans 8:28, y'all know the passage. But a lot of times we don't finish it out. Romans 8:28. We know that God causes all things to work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to His purpose. Those whom He foreknew, He predestined to be conformed to the... Is there anyone greater than Christ in relation to honoring their Father? Please say no, because there's not. Christ honored His Father greater than any man ever would. And He was also crucified. You almost have the exact same language there in relation to that. And oh, by the way, Paul doesn't think anything different, because look at verse 35. Who will separate us from the love of God? Tribulation, distress, persecution, famine, nakedness, peril, or sword? Meaning, those things are going to come upon us. Just as it is written, for your sake we are being put to death all day long. We are considered as sheep to be slaughtered. But in all of these things, we overwhelmingly, what? Conquer through Him who loved us. What is this? Is critical. It has a depth to it, but it's critical. Ruth is gonna experience well-lived, full life. Why? Why? She doesn't just know the commandments. Jennifer's right. She whispered and Dave wasn't listening. She doesn't just know the commandments, she is living and trusting the commandments. And she hasn't chosen the easier path. Young men, rich or poor. What has she chosen? The path that God has designed through His people, kinsman, redeemer. And one of the things Boaz is continually saying, we picture Boaz as this young stud that's coming in doing it. He's probably an old man that whenever you meet him in heaven, you're going to be like, oh my, you married Ruth? Because when you see Ruth, you're going to be like, but see, Ruth is trusting and actually doing the commandments of God. Which, oh, by the way, Christ calls us to. He doesn't just call us to know the commandments of God. You know, He says, you know who are those who love Him? You know the ones that are the ones that love God? It's not the ones who know the commandments. It's the one that keeps the commandments. By keeping, does He mean, oh, you need to live a good moral life? You need to trust the way of God, which is what Ruth is doing. That's what she's doing. And Boaz sees it. And Boaz says, this act of hesed, loyal love, is even greater than the first one, and the first one was great. But this one is even greater. Because you are honoring father and mother by going through kinsman redeemer, myself, old man, rather than going for young men, rich or poor. It's a lot going on there. It's a pivotal verse. Absolute pivotal verse. Now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you whatever you ask, for all of the people in the city that know that you are a woman of excellence. All right, close your Bibles. We're done. Da-da! Right? Great. In the story, Boaz says, I will do it. I will cover you. I will protect you. You are excellent woman. The same verbiage as what they've said about me. I will cover you. I will protect you. I will provide for you. You went the better way. Everything is good. It's the way the Christian life works. Trust God. Everything is good. End of the story. Your life ends like Cinderella without the whatever happens, the lost slipper. It ends at the ball. Interesting, even people who don't know God know that the life's just really not that way, right? Verse 12, but, you might say, it is true, I'm a close relative. Now, circle, however. There is a relative that is closer than me. Do what? But Boaz is my prince. Lifetime has made millions off of this understanding. The one that has shown himself full and faithful and all of these things is Boaz. But now all of a sudden in the storyline, you've got somebody else who is closer than I?
He had to be thinking about this.
He already had investigated it, didn't he? Naomi didn't bring this up, and neither did Ruth. He had already checked it out.
He had his eye on her a long time ago.
That's that old dating thing is, I like her. Does she like me? I don't know. Okay, ask your buddies. Go find out from her friends if she really likes me, right? And now it's almost this moment of, she does. Now this is interesting because Boaz has a woman who's been presented to him basically saying, cover me, redeem me, and he could have done what? He could have taken advantage of her. But what is Boaz? Boaz is the excellent man that they've spoken of. Because he says what? Sorry, but there's one in between me and you who's still first in line in relation to the covenant of God and the way that this is supposed to work. So the plot thickens. And then look at 13. Remain this night, and when morning comes, if he will redeem you, good. Let him redeem you. But if he does not wish to redeem you, then I will redeem you. And now underline, as the Lord lives. What is he? He makes a vow. He makes a vow. Lie down until morning. He does for Ruth what most counselor psychologists believe, Christian anyway, that since one of the effects of the fall in relation to women and the distinction between them and men is a need for security. A feeling need for security of this covering and protection. And Boaz says, you're going to be covered and you're going to be protected either way. Either way. She lay at his feet until morning and rose before one could recognize another. And he said, let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. What's he trying to protect? Her reputation. Her reputation. And again he said, give me the cloak that is on you and hold it. And she held it. He measured 6 measures of barley and laid it on her. Then she went into the city. She came to her mother-in-law. She said, how did it go, my daughter? I can imagine Naomi's like up all night, right? Up all night. Wonder how it's going. Wonder how it's going. She told her all that the man had done for her. She said, these 6 measures of barley he gave to me, for he said, do not go to your mother-in-law empty-handed. Then she said, wait, my daughter, until you know how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest until he settled it today. Now, end of chapter. In the Christian life, does God settle a matter without yet settling the matter? And you're in a wait period. You know what the answer to that is? Yes. Yes. Unless you're better than Ruth and Boaz. But guess what? Chances are we are not. Part of the pattern of God, again, is this cycle of provision. Am I going to move forward in what seems like the dark, in faith, trust, relationship to the command of God, exhibit love for God, hesed, loyal love, by keeping the commandments, trusting in Him when it looks like it's not going to protect me, it's going to cause me to lose my security, and I'm going to lose the very thing that I need the most. For Ruth, it's security. For Boaz, it's Ruth. For Naomi, it's almost everything, but it's future. This scene closes, curtain comes down with, tomorrow we will see. So you stay and you just have to wait because you don't know how it's going to turn out yet. Now, all of us know how we want it to turn out, But in the story, it says, we don't know yet how it's going to turn out. And in the Christian life, if you don't feel that and you move too quickly to chapter 4, you're going to be in the middle of we don't know how it turns out, and you're not going to respond appropriately. And you're going to act as if this is abnormal. Folks, it's not abnormal, it's part of the Christian life. Because God is committed to conforming us into the image of His Son, who sought to honor His Father through the hardest of times, and through the harvest of times save the world. Save the world. Yeah. So, next week we get the conclusion. Let's pray. Father God, so grateful for your word, the fullness it has. And Father, just the way in which you've given us the patterns of life in the Christian faith, both seen through the way in which you worked through all of history. And Father, may it lead us to a deeper love for you, trust in you, and keeping your commands, not to become somehow morally good, but because we love you and trust that your way is better than the way that we feel oftentimes, and sense even oftentimes, but is certainly the way to a full life. And Father, may we live full, rich lives as long as we've lived on this earth because of our trust, faith, hesed love for you. These things we pray in your Son's holy name. Amen.